हेलो एंड वेलकम टू अनदर एपिसोड ऑफ द एसएनएस क्रिकेट डायरीज। और अगर आप इस चैनल को काफी टाइम से देख रहे हैं तो आई थिंक बैकग्राउंड आपको थोड़ा डिफरेंट लग रहा होगा। दैट इज बिकॉज आई एम एट वन ऑफ माय वेरी क्लोज फ्रेंड्स प्लेस टुडे बिकॉज ऑफ सम सर्कमस्टांसेस। आई एम नॉट एबल टू डू दिस फ्रॉम माय होम, बट that doesn't really matter. What matters is that today I have one of my favorite cricket writers and podcasters that we have in the world of cricket going around. Ahmer Naqvi with us. Hello, Ahmer. Thank you so much for joining in.
My pleasure.
Okay, so for those who don't know, Ahmer is a leading consultant, content creator, and writer in Pakistani media, specifically in cricket, music, and digital media. He was the CEO of Pakistan's premier audio streaming app and has served several times as digital media consultant for the country's main sporting event, the Pakistan Super League, as well as other cricketing events. He also has a decade of experience in broadcast media as well as entertainment and has written for a broad range of foreign and local publications. So let us put all this aside. I think those who follow Emmer on his podcast channel Batta Fast as well as backbenchers that he does, I think would be well aware of the kind of quality that he brings to cricket podcasting. And of course, Emmer also used to write for Cricinfo. So those who follow Cricinfo can go and read some of his articles. I will link some of those articles in the description of this video. So Emmer, thank you so much once again for joining in. और सबसे पहले तो I think आप मेरे से बात करते before we started about the Indian connection that you have probably. Would you like to share about that?
Yeah, for sure. So my brother-in-law, Yatharth, is from Delhi, and when I was meeting their family, तो मैं उन लोग से ये कह रहा था कि I've experienced that generally मेरे काम को और जो मैंने कुछ किया है मुझे इंडिया में ज्यादा इज्जत मिलती है कि every time I've been on an Indian podcast or something, I feel like I've been very, very pleasantly and with a lot of humility, been very happy to see, कि उन्हें मेरे कोट्स याद होंगे या जो मैं लिख जो मैं चीजें भूल गया हूं उन्हें याद होती हैं. सो आई टेल माय सिस्टर कि भाई अगर मुझे वीजा मिले तो मैं तो फौरन इंडिया पहुंच जाऊंगा. और मेरे वहां पे शायद सितारे ज्यादा गर्दिश में होते हैं.
No,
Sorry.
I think one reason why Emma you probably be liked here by the Indians quite a lot. Of course, there is natural curiosity amongst Indians for what happens in Pakistan and Pakistan. I think generation जो मेरा है which started watching in the 90s and followed that great Pakistan team of the 90s and early 2000s. Obviously, वो एक natural connection बन जाता है because of similar cultures and everything else, and also. I think the way Ahmer does the kind of satire that he brings to cricket in a light-hearted way is something that is very different from the mundane, I think, day-to-day cricket analysis that many people do, which is also fine. But I think there's always a point of difference that I think you bring in. So, and that's why I think. For me, it's an honor that my fledgling channel has you as a guest today. So thank you so much, Emma. So Emma, so when I thought of approaching you for this episode, there was not any particular agenda as to what all things would like to cover. But yes, of course, Pakistan cricket is something that I would like you to talk about, and I would like to start off with the recent, I mean, on a slightly bad note, but the recent Australian tour. Do you now? हमने देखा है in previous many years, of course, the results have been the same, but I think this time, do you think that there was positively something? I mean, genuinely something really positive that came out of this tour, which probably hasn't come out in previous tours.
थोड़ा सा ना मैं घूम घुमा के इसका जवाब देता हूँ. मैं अक्सर कहता हूँ कि ना पाकिस्तान में रहना इतना मुश्किल है कि अगर हम दोजख में भी जाएं विच इज हेल, तो वहां पे भी हम कह रहे होंगे कि यार देखो कितने टाइम पे हमारी पिटाई हो रही है और ये जिस आग में डाल रहे हैं बिल्कुल टॉप क्वालिटी आग है, बड़ा अच्छा निजाम है दोजख का कि हमारे अपने मुल्क का निजाम इतना खराब है दैट we would probably be admiring hell for being well organized. I think it's the same way कि Australian tours are like hell. और उसमें कभी कभार आप कह सकते हैं कि ओ आज जो है वो तेजाब इतना ज्यादा नहीं था या आज इतनी इतनी हमें चाबुक जोर से नहीं पड़ी है because I think like as you are well aware we have not won a test there since 95 और काफी दफा अब हो चुका है कि एटलीस्ट एक मैच तो आप ऐसे तरीके से हार रहे हो कि उसके नाइटमेयर्स आपको जिंदगी भर तक आते रहेंगे तो मिसाल के तौर पे इन 99 इन होबार्ट they're chasing 300 odd Langer is not given out and Gilchrist उस वक्त किसी को भी नहीं पता था वो क्या बला है पहली दफा पाकिस्तान ने उसको दरियाफ्त किया then you go to 2010 in Sydney where a certain Kamran Akmal made sure that he is going to haunt a generation forever. He dropped like I think 6 catches. If you look at those videos, it's very hard not to think about fixing when Kamran Akmal is missing very easy chances, very easy stumping chances. And it's a crazy match because we could have defeated them with a follow-on, and then they Hussey and Siddle put some like 120 ka target or something, and we collapse and lose that. 2016, that was probably the most hope I had because that was like the Misbah era at its peak. और वो इंग्लैंड में बहुत अच्छा टूर खेल के आए थे 3-4 साल से मतलब in my history as a Pakistani fan, we never had a team that was consistently free of controversy, free of infighting, and had a very clear identity of how they want to play Test cricket. And so they go there, they almost chase down 450 at Gabba of all places, lose that match, then go all out within a session to lose the second match and then they lose the third match. So this tour was not as demoralizing. Both के मतलब जब धुलाई भी हुई थी, so they didn't beat us that badly, but also the matches that we came close, we weren't that close. I think at one point they were 5 down and then Mitch Marsh hit like a 90 something. Yeah. That was I think the closest we were. So it was a more pleasant Australian tour because at no match were we being totally humiliated. And I think वो था कि वो एक वार्नर का कैच पकड़ लेते तो एक Mitch Marsh I think had 4 reviews overturned. And
yeah, so 46 for 4 when Abdullah Shafiq dropped the catch.
Yes. तो वहां पे क्या कहते हैं कि this was obviously upsetting. What was different was that this was possibly, in my eyes at least, was agar aap weakest na kahe, was definitely still the most inexperienced side that had toured Australia, possibly in my lifetime. In the 90s, you had Wasim's great sides, and then maybe the 2004 one that goes with Inzamam and Bob Woolmer was also a very, very green side. But other than that, this was a very, very inexperienced side. And so to see, firstly, someone like Amir Jamal, who had been on the fringes of international cricket. And I'll be honest with you, I did not rate him very highly at all as a test match bowler specifically. He came in there and he was, he just brought such great attitude to the test match. Similarly, Mir Hamza is somebody I'd been following for a very long time, and I'd been very when I first heard about him, it was very much just the same way Argentinians were always looking for the next Maradona, and now they'll keep looking for the next Messi. We were always looking for the next Wasim. And her left arm bowler, या her pace bowler के ऊपर आप, Wasim है या Shoaib है या Imran है, you were looking for that archetype. And I remember Mir Hamza, I was very excited for him. He didn't fit any of these archetypes. I was very disappointed with him. He comes into this tour and he plays really well. तो उस तरीके में Shan Masood was made a captain. We were all like, he's a lame duck captain because they're going to lose here and they're going to get rid of him. But he still was really good in that tour. Because I think with Shan again, like the common kind of thing with him is that he's never been that talented, but he's a very, very intelligent cricketer, and he maximized that as much as he could. And Yeah, so they were choti moti. I think because शुरू से ही पता था कि भाई अभी तो कोई उम्मीद नहीं है. So then even like Saim Ayub hitting 35 was like, ooh, wow, maza aa gaya. But you know, beggars can't be choosers wale halat hote hain every time we go to Australia.
Yeah, I think I would like to focus on Shan Masood because मुझे इस series में लगा that he played a very attacking brand of cricket, especially I think in the second test when he took
Yeah.
on line. But वो I think at the same time then when that attacking brand when goes into reckless strokes because I think he hit a boundary or a six and then again he tried something of Nathan Lyon and he got out. So, do you think that? I mean, what do you think was Shan Masood's mindset in that series? Why was he trying to play like that? Because he was never a very attacking player earlier.
That's a good question. I think if you go back to before the World Cup, Pakistan toured Sri Lanka, and um, you know, there was a different coaching setup. Mickey Arthur and kya naam hai, Grant Pat we were involved, but also one of my really close friends, Rehan Haq, was team manager, and so I had a bit of an insight into what was going inside the dressing room, etc. And there was a very clear conversation within the Pakistani team. They started calling it the Pakistani way or the Pakistan way. Um, and the focus was on playing attacking cricket. And one of the reasons, again, like I think um, in modern cricket, particularly after the advent of T20, one of the things that's come through in test matches as well is that probably most batters don't have the capacity to, you know, play that 4 hour, 32 kind of innings anymore, you know. And in fact, like in the Misbah era, one of the things they were really good at was that they would bowl, you know, wide and off stump, so you didn't have opportunities to score, and then you'd get frustrated and look to make something happen. So my point is that with modern batting, there is an emphasis on taking action rather than, you know, in the past where we've grown up watching Test cricket where it was like you can absorb a lot of balls as well. I think that doesn't happen anymore, and so keeping that in mind, and particularly if you're not a very strong batting side, it does make sense to be more proactive, get more runs on the board, etc. And particularly, I think Pakistan wanted to go that way. Um, you know, I'm blanking a little bit. There was a larger theory behind this, but you know, okay, there is it is a style that gave Pakistan more chances to win matches. You know, for example, if you're playing in Australia and you're trying to like bat out 6 sessions, that's probably very unlikely. You know, the not to say that people haven't done that, even Pakistani teams have done that in the past, but with this kind of inexperienced side, it was unlikely that they're going to dominate the Australian batting for long stretches of time. It made more sense to take the initiative as quickly as you can. और जब इन्होंने इस स्टाइल से खेला था इन श्रीलंका, they chased down a big target, they had some good success. It definitely was playing to the strengths of an inexperienced squad. And I think that's where I really admired Shan, क्योंकि you know, उसकी गेम ऐसी नहीं है कि वो हर बॉल पे निकल के लायन को मारना शुरू कर दे या इस तरीके से खेले. But what was really good was that even though it was affecting maybe his you know, run tally or whatever, he was leading from the front कि भाई हमें इस तरीके से ही खेलना है और मैं भी इस तरीके से खेलते हुए बेशक आउट हो जाऊं या जो कुछ भी हो. And as you pointed out, that's probably not his strength, but that was possibly the only route or the best route that Pakistan had for victory in that kind of situation. I do think that it obviously didn't help that the coaching and management setup that had introduced this tactic had been replaced by the time you go to Australia. तो उस वक्त मोहम्मद हफीज बैठे हुए हैं और मतलब you know, मोहम्मद हफीज का मैं जितना बोलूं कम है, वो इतने बड़े अफलातून है कि you know, I'm sure Socrates regrets never meeting Hafiz and being challenged by a superior mind. But वो हफीज साहब थे, उनकी अपनी पंचायत चल रही होती है, तो I think that did not help. But you know, I doubt that Pakistan would have been able to defeat Australia in that tour, but I think Shan's approach gave them the best chance. And if agar hum catches pakad lete or thodi kismat hamare saath hoti, maybe we could have, you know, especially in that second test, squeaked out a win.
Yeah, yeah. I think now that you mentioned Mohammad Hafiz, I was listening to one of the podcasts that you did with Osman Samiuddin. I think that was on the back of the second test or maybe after the test series ended. जो जिसमें मोहम्मद हफीज ने ये कहा था which you both counter. I mean, you both were not in agreement, but I would like you to throw some light because I feel that what he said made sense when he said that the under 19 cricketers that come from Pakistan after playing the under 19, they should not be straight away drafted into the PSL or into the T20. They should first get into the grind of test cricket, I mean, domestic cricket. Yeah. So I think I would like to know, why do you think, Ahmed, that is? I mean, I know उस podcast में Osman ने भी बोला that we are heading more towards T20. We need more T20 type of cricket. But then at the same time, how will the test team develop if these upcoming cricketers do not prioritize domestic cricket or do not get into domestic cricket?
It's a good question, and I think there's multiple angles to it. So I'll try and answer in order of importance. I think the biggest reason is that, where is the future of cricket going, right? We have to keep in mind, like, for example, India and Pakistan are very similar countries, right? But there are significant ways in which India is different. And so, if you're a poor person, what is your opportunity to make it to the top of society? Right now, not to say that India is a much more meritocratic place or whatever, but you've got a long established system, for example, of the IIT setup, right? There's a very strong educational network there. Pakistan doesn't have anything like that. So, not that it happens in India all the time, but there's still the possibility of a really poor person studying hard and making it to IIT and kind of making it big or whatever, right? Or you could, like, up to nahi hota, but maybe 40 years ago, you could have joined Bollywood and come from like a, low middle class background or whatever, or working class background and make it to the top. In Pakistan, I would say that other than cricket, there's absolutely no way that a working class person can make it to a wealthy kind of, to the higher classes of society, social mobility wise, right? Now, obviously, social mobility को और तरीके से भी handle करना चाहिए, but the point I'm trying to make is that cricket is an extremely rare thing in Pakistan that can change your material and social life in a country where it is almost impossible to do that. If you're born poor, you're almost definitely going to die poor, right? There's not a lot of options कि पढ़ लिख के ये कर लो या म्यूजिक बना लो या मूवी बना लो, कुछ नहीं होगा, आप गरीब ही रहोगे. It's only cricket that gives you that opportunity in a legal way. Maybe आप स्मगलर वगलर बन के कुछ कर सकते हो, but legally that's the only which way. So now why I'm emphasizing on this is that you're a poor kid from some village in Pakistan. Why should you prioritize test cricket? That doesn't pay you very well. First class cricket is in Pakistan is a joke, because for starters, we change the format every 2-3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, that it was in the socialist economy in the 70s where the idea was that corporations will be part of first class cricket, and they were largely nationalized bodies back then, and they will provide a lifetime employment for athletes. That paradigm ended 30 years ago, but cricket still plays that way. So the gas company has a team, and the research lab has a team, and
जिसको डिपार्टमेंट क्रिकेट कहते हैं.
जी हाँ, और उसको खत्म किया गया था ताकि आपके पास एक ज्यादा modern rational किस्म का system आए, but वो went the other way where they only had 6 teams in a country of 220 million, probably not enough for all the players, etc. But now they're back to like a 22 team double tier stupid thing. तो नहीं तो उसमें खास पैसे मिलते, बट आप चले भी जाए, पाकिस्तान टेस्ट कितने खेलता है? Like you become a test match specialist, well, you're not really going to make a lot of money, and you're not going to be, you will have to put in an insane amount of time. Probably, there'll be some kind of bribes involved to make it up the different kind of layers. You'll need contacts, and you'll need a lot of luck. And then you're going to give that up to make something that doesn't pay you, that abhi Pakistan ne test khela, you're not going to play another test for like a year. And then us waqt tak T20 में 2 बच्चों ने छक्के मार दिए तो हफीज जैसे ही लोगों ने खिला देंगे, और जो बेचारा टेस्ट मैच स्पेशलिस्ट उसे ड्रॉप कर देंगे. We've had a guy who's emigrated to the US so that, oh, kya naam hai uska? Imran Butt ya kya naam tha? He did that. We've got Zafar Gohar, who's becoming a UK citizen because, not to say that this is directly because of test matches or anything, but the point is that cricket again is an opportunity for people to change their lives. And then you're insisting that they go in the least lucrative one. That to me is one problem, okay, which is outside the game of cricket. Now let's talk about the game of cricket itself. Johnny Bairstow has missed like I think 50 tests and he's already hit 100 tests. No Pakistani has hit 100 tests in like I think 25 years or something.
No, I think last one was Yunus Khan.
Yes, and Yunus Khan debuted in the 90s.
Yeah.
No one in this century has hit 100 tests.
Right.
So tell me this, like England, I'm sorry to say, sucks. Like they've had some good eras, but they're not like some amazing test team. But cricket is stratified into the big three that play each other 100 million times a year, so that every two-bit cricketer from these countries has played like 80 tests, while absolute legends of the game from Sri Lanka or Pakistan or New Zealand or West Indies will never play even a comparable percentage of that. So that the second question then becomes, okay, I become a test match specialist and I eschew, there's very different skill sets involved. And, Pakistan, I think we don't even believe that T20 batting is a skill. Okay, अभी हमारे चेयरमैन भी कहते कि जी आप अपनी मसल बनाएं ताकि आप छक्के मार सकें.
Are you talking about the present chairman?
Chairman, yes. I'm sorry because we change chairmans every few minutes, so I know it's hard to keep up. But ये भाई साहब ने कहा है कि जी foreign players are very muscular, so they hit sixes out of the ground, and our players can't hit sixes, which is factually incorrect. Both in terms of who's hitting sixes and also what you need to hit a big six. But the level of jahalat in this country is unprecedented. But what I'm saying is that you become a test match specialist for Pakistan. When are you going to play test matches? You'll get like maybe a 2 test match series once every you'll maybe tour the SENA countries once every 6 years, and you won't get any practice matches. You won't get any time to play. You'll have 2 test matches, but by the time you get used to the conditions, the tour is over, you'll have a terrible average and everything. And then on the other end, you've got, let's say the Indian team, it tours Australia like literally at the drop of a hat. So even inexperienced guys have put in a lot of time playing in those conditions. And then that's not even to keep in mind that, again, like the distribution of revenue in cricket. So an Indian player or an Australian player, even if he decides to focus on test cricket, is being paid a lot more, is not having to worry about their financial security. They have, even at their lower levels in domestic cricket and all those, being paid a lot more than any Pakistani is. And then they're going to play. They have opportunities to play that. Now, so if I'm a 19-year-old cricketer in Pakistan, I'm from a working class background. If I start playing T20 cricket and I never play for Pakistan, but I managed to make it to the leagues, which is what one boy, Ahmer Naqvi, right now, he literally made reels of himself batting, sent it to the BPL and got a contract from them. So if we take his example, right, this one contract will change his family's life. He lives in one of the biggest slums in the world, in Orangi town. It'll change his family life, just that one contract, right? He picks up 2-3 more contracts and he'll change his next few generations' lives. ठीक है, ये 2 साल में फ्रैंचाइज क्रिकेट खेल के कर सकता है. फर्ज करें वो कहता है नहीं मैंने नहीं खेलनी, मोहम्मद हफीज बिल्कुल सही कह रहे हैं, मुझे फर्स्ट क्लास और टेस्ट और ये खेलना है. First class में is probably playing in some stupid department that the selectors are never going to go watch. There's 22 teams. None of the selectors have time to watch all of them. They're not being like, the previous setup was being televised, that they've stopped doing that again. Somehow he makes it, and then there'll be, every 6 months, the selections and the chairman and everything else will keep changing. So maybe Hafiz likes him, but now Hafiz is gone and someone else has come in and he doesn't care about that. He wants to bring his own guys, X, Y, Z. And then फिर वही होगा कि आप 5 साल में 15 टेस्ट खेलेंगे. Maybe you play well in 2 and you play badly in 1 and they drop you and you're out. And now no one's going to pick you for franchise cricket because you're known as a red ball player. You're not going to make a lot of money from departmental cricket. And you don't have an opportunity in international cricket because Pakistan doesn't have opportunities, because cricket doesn't offer opportunities that are equal to test matches. So in that context, are you crazy to suggest that a young person should start prioritizing on, like, cricket as a sport doesn't care about test cricket? Why should a 19-year-old working class kid from Pakistan care about test cricket? Where, like, where does the ICC care about test cricket? Does India, Australia, or England care about test cricket? They don't. You look at their actions. Cricket is one of the only sports in the world जहां पे कोई लीग शीग कुछ नहीं है. तो हर साल होता है कि वो इंडिया, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, इंग्लैंड एक दूसरे से खेलते हैं, फिर वो अपनी प्लेयरों के नाम प्लेयर ऑफ द टीम ऑफ द ईयर एंड टेस्ट 11 ऑफ द ईयर, एंड हर साल होता है. There'll be Kiwis and Pakistanis and West Indians and whatever, Sri Lankans who've performed better in terms of numbers and achievements, but they'll get ignored for somebody like Johnny Bairstow being picked in the end of year. Obviously, it doesn't matter these end of year teams, but they're representative of the sports mentality and its priorities, right? Okay, आप Guardian उठा लो, आप Cricinfo उठा लो, आप Wisden उठा लो, they're not in conversation with Test cricket outside the big three. They're not. They'll only talk about these other teams if they're playing the big three. No one cares about Sri Lanka and West Indies or Ireland or Afghanistan. So, jab cricket as a sport has completely stopped caring about, and it never cared about it was always a colonial thing. तो वो इंग्लैंड ऑस्ट्रेलिया एक दूसरे छम छम खेल के खुश होते रहते थे. वो तो फिर एशियन टीम्स ने पैसे बनाए, इंडिया के पास पैसे आए, तो तब उनको थोड़ी they had to change their tune. But cricket is a stupid sport that has no idea of what it should be doing for itself. It has no one watches out for cricket, right? Everyone watches out for their own fiefdoms. And so I feel that उस सारी चीजों को दिमाग में रखते हुए Mohammad Hafiz, somebody who's made a lot of money from cricket, who is going to keep getting gigs because he's famous enough, so he comes on TV and he comes on selection teams and he gets to be the director of cricket, it's very easy for him to give this gap. He's made his life, his children are in expensive schools, his wife is wearing designer clothes. Why? And now he's going to lecture some 19-year-old that you shouldn't play PSL. Like, that's offensive to me.
Yeah, I think, Emma, you made some valid points, especially the 3 points that you've mentioned, reasons within cricket, reasons beyond cricket, and of course, what the ICC itself doesn't really care. And I think, yeah, I do agree with you. It's just that I think, somewhere down the line, maybe the smaller teams also have to make a decision. And I think probably, yeah, they've already made decision with the leagues that are there. So yeah, I mean, this debate can go on and on, but yeah, point well taken, Emma. Now, when we talk about PSL, how do you think PSL has changed the financial status of, firstly, the PCB as well as its the individual cricketers? Do you think that it has had some positive effect financially?
I think it has had a revolutionary aspect. Um, I think that if the PSL hadn't happened, the PSL was up. I think you can find me writing in cricket for around 2014, 15, advocating for Pakistan to have its own league, because at that point, not only had this, again, the IPL had been around for like almost a decade at that point. Other countries had their league setups, etc. But also that Pakistan was now into like the 5th year of exile, which had a huge impact on its own revenues and resources, etc. And I believed back then, and I still believe now, that had the PSL not happened, cricket in Pakistan would have died a slow death, because there was no way to make money. It was as simple as that, right? Like, and even if they had managed to bring international teams back to Pakistan, the economy of global cricket had changed with franchise leagues, and specifically Pakistanis being banned, or whatever you want to call it, from the IPL was, was again, was like an existential problem for Pakistani cricket, because it was the biggest kind of revenue source that you were completely cut off from. And then most importantly, I think that, you've got this huge country that's passionate about cricket, but it only really had one team to pour all its energies into. And I remember, like, I'd been writing, like, Karachi and Lahore, for example, as cities, as cultures, as peoples, have a lot of like, rivalry, ya jo kuch bhi. That'll very easily translate into cricket. And people don't need, ke, oh, this is a new team or it's a franchise team. Doesn't matter. Like, I think one of those great lies that Europeans like to tell is कि जी देखें हमारे 200 साल से club चल रहा है, that's the only real thing, and ये वो, it's BS. Sports is made up, and if the whatever you're making up resonates enough with people, they'll follow it immediately. So, and that's exactly what happened. And so the PSL right now is, if I'm not wrong, and I don't know these numbers, I'm not really a finance guy, but if I'm not wrong, is the biggest revenue generator for the PCB. I think more importantly, it's एक तरफ तो पैसे बन रहे, but also in terms of interest, where Pakistan's national side, A, wasn't playing at home, B, because it wasn't playing at home, wasn't able to play that well. There was just a poor team, poor product, poor situation, and obviously is going to lose fans. Instead, now you've got 6 new teams, 6 new fan bases, and so much interest in it. And then I think the most important thing, Joe, when I started working in cricket, it really hit me. I don't think it hits you as a fan, and particularly because people who follow cricket, whether they're Indians, Pakistanis, Sri Lankans, we come from societies where cricket is the number one thing. There's some other stuff on the side, but cricket is the number one thing. So we don't really think outside of it. But when I started working, so I would pitch to XYZ channel, ke, hey, we can do this show and falana dimkana, and they'd be like, we can give you a contract for this 6-week series, but then we don't know when we're going to play cricket again, so we don't want your show to be regular. Versus if you're in the Premier League, you tell them by her Monday we'll do a show, and yes, Saturday, Sunday ko matches honge, Monday ko aap show kar le, and you can do that from August to May, and it's a logical thing, and every sport runs like this. But cricket runs like, oh, आज खेलना है, चलो तू खेल ले, मैं खेल रहा हूँ, चलो आजा, चल ले खेल लेते. Or you can't really, capitalism doesn't work like that, versus the franchise leagues. And I wrote about this for Cricket for why I think like franchise cricket will completely take over and replace international cricket, is because franchise cricket happens. You can set the date to it. That Mumbai will play Chennai at least twice a year, every year. Pakistan will play India, who knows? Maybe in an ICC tournament, it'll never maybe play again bilaterally. Will West Indies play Australia? Who knows? But that Peshawar and Quetta will play every year. Fans need that kind of system. Businesses need that kind of systematic approach. Because cricket in these societies has never had a challenge, so oot-patang tariko mein, it has retained that. But even for India, like when you look at products, the IPL versus the Indian national team, maybe right now, sure, there's a lot of interest, whatever. But once you have generations that have grown up with the IPL, who've never seen a viable India-Pakistan rivalry, who've never seen like a global, none of us have ever seen actually all 10 teams playing each other regularly. Why should they care about international cricket? So coming back to the PSL as well, like that was, which in the directions that cricket was going, Pakistan, like, if everyone's going in a certain direction and they've got their leagues are essentially the cars that are getting them there, and Pakistan didn't have a car and also didn't have a direction. So the PSL for me is it's that metaphor, right? Where it allows you to be a part of world cricket and to be in that direction that cricket is evolving, and to provide a way where cricket is viable in Pakistan. Because like I think शुरू में और अभी भी होता है कि, oh, why aren't the big names coming? IPL gets the big names and PSL doesn't get the big names. But in terms of interest, it actually doesn't matter. People are more than happy to watch, like, youngsters from Pakistan, and the odd kind of international player or whatever. But 9 seasons in, I think that to me, it's very clear that the presence of big stars has very discernible negative or positive impact. Like, sure, it's good to have them, but the league won't collapse without them. And that was probably the most important thing for the league to be able to achieve, because then it means that cricket in Pakistan can continue, because it's very likely that India will throw Pakistan out of ICC, for example. Like, I don't want to piss people off or whatever. But we have to be clear that the ICC is now, BCCCI for a very long time was one of the strongest institutions in India. Now it is, but it's not even given to a competent guy of Modi's regime. He's given it to uske bete ko de diya hai, who is, it's a very, very difficult competition, but he's probably the most incompetent cricket administrator, which is saying something. This is probably the most incompetent people in the world are cricket administrators. But you've got Jay Shah, and maybe one day, like, he forgets to reply to Modi's message, and now he's scared. And in order to make him happy again, he kicks Pakistan out of cricket. It could happen. And, okay, the fact that the BCCI has largely become an arm of the Indian government rather than the Indian state means that the BCCI can be expected to do, unexpected things. I think like maybe under Dalmia Vagera, you could tell that the BCCI would take on the Indian government and come out on top. That's no longer the case. And if that's no longer the case, then it means whatever the Indian government's ideology is could impact the BCCI and by extension, the rest of cricket as well. And so if that happens, without the PSL, what would Pakistan, do? And so earlier you alluded to smaller countries also need to do something. I think this is the only rational thing smaller countries can do, is that they have their own franchise leagues, is that maybe, they kind of collaborate with one another in terms of creating windows and players and sharing resources. But beyond that, unless the big three out of their own against their own self-interest decide to do something for the good for the game, smaller nations, smaller economies rather, don't have any opportunity.
I'm just I'm just wondering how things were in the 90s, Ahmed, because I'm sure आपने तो मुझसे पहले से cricket देखा है, but even I've seen a time when cricket was probably uh, genuinely a more equitable sport, at least in terms of competitive teams. Maybe not in terms of finance even that time, but I don't know where things have gone wrong, and of course, मतलब ये धीरे-धीरे it's dying a slow death, but yeah, I mean, but we can keep talking about it for hours, but I would now like to take you, Emma, back a little bit into time and back into the 90s, because I think both we here in India as well as in Pakistan, we love to reminisce that time and those days when we as Indians fans would मतलब हम पाकिस्तान से लूज करते थे, but at the same time there was a thrill to watch them play against us and win against us, and when we would get that odd win against Pakistan in the 90s, मुझे जो याद आता है, of course, I would like to talk, I would like your take on why Pakistan has never been able to win a World Cup game, now a 50 over World Cup game, because they won a T20 World Cup game, but I mean हमने last year देखा that again that was so one-sided. But then yes, before I would before you answer that, I'd like you to just share your impression about what was the general feeling of an average Pakistani fan about the Indian team of the 90s, और वो मतलब क्या सोचते थे when Srinath and Prasad used to bowl against Pakistani batsmen.
I think, the 90s were a very unique time for cricket. And why I say that is that for hundreds of years, cricket had been a colonial sport that was administered by the colonizers. And, the cricket ICC was the Imperial Cricket Council before it became the International Cricket Council. And I think there's a great book called War Minus the Shooting by Mike Marquesi, which is about the 96 World Cup in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. But it's also really about how cricket was changing back then. Because what had happened was that the advent of ODIs had really exploded the popularity of cricket in the subcontinent. The advent of Sharjah had provided a venue that was outside the purview of the old kind of powers. And the liberalization, particularly of the Indian economy, had opened up a new kind of area of financial power. And so for the 90s, these Asian cricket boards were working very closely together. And so it's a kind of subcontinental collaboration and resistance to the global north that we probably haven't seen in any field ever. Because India and Pakistan, unfortunately, have always been at loggerheads, and we never kind of combine our power to fight the Goras. The 90s are this brief time where that happens. What is also super interesting is that, as you pointed out, like for a variety of reasons, every team had different reasons, that it was a very competitive time just on the field. So
Yeah.
you had the end of the dominant West Indies, you had the rise of the dominant Australians, you had a great Pakistan team, but also you had Sri Lanka becoming world champions. You had, India kind of transitioning into what would be their golden era.
Mhm.
So for a lot of ways, you just had really good cricket happening.
Even South Africa.
South Africa returns to the game, exactly, and those reasons are probably not replicable. Maybe one or two are, but like a lot of them were just kind of you know uh, important moments in time that were happening at the same time, right? Like the India's economy can grow again, but it'll never have that revolutionary change that happened in the 90s.
Mhm.
Similarly, like Sharjah and UAE now exist, but like that first kind of burst where it was so lucrative and it was such a cultural thing, and it was such a like, I mean, I think most of us haven't seen the birth of Sharjah cricket, but it was very similar to the birth of IPL in that it was very glamorous and it was really fun and it was really modern and it was offering you something that the old cricket was not offering. So, that way, when we looked at the Pakistani team, I'll be very honest with you, and I regret this my whole life, but at some point in the late 90s, I was kind of like, man, I hope India starts winning. I'm so tired of beating them. And what, like, I think 25 years of God being like, ठीक है बेटा, आप हो जाएं tired. आप देखें फिर क्या होता है आपके साथ. um, तो I think उस वाली टीम को जब उस वक्त देखते थे, मैं तो मतलब, I was in my teens. Teenagers are dickheads, so so I really didn't have any respect for that Indian team by and large, other than few players. Like I really liked, even though he destroyed us, I really did like Ajay Jadeja, and I definitely liked Indian batters. I don't think Indian bowlers even now, even when I see those matches and I see those records and averages and whatever, I'm still really not going to rate Srinath and Prasad the way that I would for later Indian bowlers even. So definitely there was, and again, like I'm telling you my personal impressions as a child. I was 16 when the 90s ended. So, that dominant era was really when I was a kid, and you look at the world through much more simpler lenses, and it was very enjoyable beating India, and it was very fun beating India, and it was like I want it to be a little bit more competitive, etc. But it becomes like in those memories, I also have to keep in mind that, very quickly at the end of the 90s, like basically, I think there's post Mumbai attacks and the rivalry changes a lot. But probably the first 7, 8 years of the 21st century is a very close time for the rivalry. Back then, it felt like, oh God, India is dominating us because we had the upper hand in so long that when it kind of started evening up, it felt worse than it actually was. Now that I look back at that time, I'm like, that was a very even time in cricket. We had some really, obviously that was the only kind of tests we played as well in our lifetimes, apart from the 99 tour. So it was really fun to watch it that way. And I think that Indian team, to 21st century Indian team, definitely that's one where like it was equal. I liked a lot of players. I hated a lot of players. I loved Yuvraj on it. I loved Dravid on it. I think lots of people were big Dhoni fans. That team definitely had a lot more. I think the 90s team, so the 90s team beats us at Bangalore and in Manchester in the World Cup. And both those matches kind of felt fluky. And they also beat us, sorry, in the 92
Yeah.
World Cup as well. They beat us in all three World Cups that decade.
Yeah.
And maybe Bangalore, I think, was a great match, but also one where it felt like a, you know, अगर वसीम अकरम खेल लेता तो हम जीत जाते, etc etc, but that was a good Indian team. I think the 92 and 99 wins were also like forlorn Indian teams that had terrible tournaments versus a Pakistani side that would make it to the final. So it didn't feel so bad either. And there was a sense of like a flukiness. Okay, both the 92 and 99 Indian teams had disappointing tournaments. Beating Pakistan was one of their few highlights. Versus the 92 Pakistan team wins it and the 99 makes the final and is very good. So it did feel like a bit, it's a bit fluky. Like I think 2003 was a symbolic changing of the guard. And most importantly, because up until
yeah,
क्योंकि उससे पहले तक again, asshole kids like me didn't rate Tendulkar at all and called him a choker and this and that and ye wo. And had Tendulkar's career ended in 99, probably that would have been my takeaway of him. It was only when he started playing well, and then I remember I was like when Sachin made it to whatever 100 or some milestone. So they asked writers from every country to write about him, and I was asked to write from Pakistan. And I looked up his career, and I was pretty shocked that even in that era where I thought he was a joker loser, he was really good against Pakistan. He was excellent against Sachin, ऐसी मुफ्त में उसकी hype नहीं थी. But mere dimag mein he was a faltu player, and it was really that Centurion match that forced me to look at history differently. So I think that definitely a dominant, much better Indian side beat an aging, dying Pakistani side. But then after that, like I think Mohali was the last time that was basically the last match of the cricketing era you and I grew up with. I would say Mohali ends that chapter forever. Probably that chapter ended with the Mumbai attacks, but Mohali, and as long as Congress was in power, there was still some tours, वगैरह, तो थोड़ा बहुत वो रहा था. I think that's the end of that era for people of our age, millennials, the cricket that they grew up with. I think after that, I believe it was 2012 only when Kohli hit 183 and defeated us in a final. I think that was that game. After that, it becomes a completely, lopsided rivalry. And again, if those two teams play regularly, the rivalry would not be so lopsided. But this is again with the PSL is a huge thing. So you talk to Pakistanis who played in that. You remember that World T20 or Asia Cup or something in Kolkata where we got all out for like, I don't know, 80 something, and then Ahmer got 2 wickets, but then
that was the Asia Cup in Bangladesh just before the 2016 T20 World Cup.
Right. So usme, either in that World Cup match or in that Asia Cup match, a friend was at that hotel, and the next day, multiple players were talking about how when they stopped, when they walked into the ground, or when they saw Rohit or Kohli or whatever, that they were literally shaking, with fear. Okay. Versus the team that beats India in the Champions Trophy final was very inexperienced, but all those guys had played in the PSL in pressure conditions in front of full crowds with international players. So you look at someone like Shadab and Hassan and Fakhr and whatever in that match, and they're unki टांगे नहीं कांप रही थी. And तो अभी भी यही होता है कि आप इतना rarely खेलते हो कि अब आप ये देखो कि we seem to have caught up in T20s. We've played 2 epic encounters in World Cups. Well, not one was epic for us. One was epic overall. Which is again, these are a core from the team that played India so well. All of them are captains of their PSL sides and have been playing, etc., etc. But in ODIs, we're not playing ODIs that much. We're definitely not playing against India, and so again that gulf plays out. And I think that the rivalry can only become relevant again if they play each other more regularly.
Although I think जब वो 2017 Champions Trophy final जीती थी, मुझे लगा था personally that could be a turning point in the rivalry, because till then, I think from 2003 World Cup onwards till 2017, in ODIs, whatever ODIs we were playing, we usually were winning quite a lot. In fact, in between, of course, yes, Pakistan जब India आई थी वो 6-match ODI series 4-2 जीती थी, but then apart from that, we were mostly winning a lot more than Pakistan. So I thought probably 2017 के बाद might be a turning point, but then 2019 World Cup happened. 2023 World Cup has happened. I mean, yes, we haven't played too many ODIs, but then yeah, it seems as if the momentum has gone back to India in terms of ODIs. But yes, in T20s, definitely the contests are a lot closer, and
Hmm.
of course, I think Asia Cup जो formats change होते रहते हैं उसमें भी I think we get a chance to meet each other, and I think it's so disgusting, Amar, to see the Asian Cricket Council. I mean, cricket in general is so money minded that आप एक format, I mean, चार पांच टीम्स या छह टीम्स का एक कंपटीशन में आप उसको भी दो ग्रुप्स में डिवाइड करते हो और उसमें इंडिया पाकिस्तान को रखते हो और एक एक्स्ट्रा राउंड भी करते हो. I mean, this is like, I mean, and that's what Emma, I have a problem with the World Cup format also. I don't know, इस पे ज्यादा बात लोग करते नहीं है, but I would like to know whether you have ever thought about it, that why don't we have a quarterfinal format? I mean, we had it in between, but generally the ICC has been averse to having a quarterfinal stage. They usually have a bloated Super 6, Super 8, Super 12. Why can't we? I mean, I know I'm being naive. I think it's all about money. But don't you think it'll be more exciting if we have another knockout round after the group stage rather than having another group stage after a group stage?
Man, so I feel like for for maybe like I think 21 to 23, I barely followed cricket because I was just so exhausted and bored and frustrated with cricket. And I think this question is a good example of it. You and I can both tell what will be a more interesting format for the world. You and I also both know that it won't happen, not because people have better formats in mind, but the organizers and the broadcasters want to make sure that they get the financial bonanza from an India Pakistan game guaranteed. Now, what that means is that you're sacrificing the growth of the sport and the tournament for the short-term gain of making sure that Star or ESPN or Sky or whoever it is making bank from one Pakistan India game. And what is happening is that because you're putting those Pakistan India games in these kind of low stakes, stupid environments, the matches are usually really, really boring. And as such, like, I mean, the only interesting Pakistan India matches that we've had in ODIs at least was when there was jeopardy involved in that final. Otherwise, we've seen some really, really terrible one-sided games. And as you say, you zoom out, and that's again, like I've complained about this a lot on this podcast, but it's you ask a question and you want to ask an intelligent, serious question. The answer will always come down to, as you said, it comes down to money, it comes down to poorly organized game. So something, for example, I'll give you a comparison, right? So what happened with football was that the FIFA had a lot more members, should you say, but it was dominated by the Europeans, right? As a politically, socially, culturally, financially, etc., etc. But then because FIFA had so many different members, so starting from maybe like João Havelange, who's the Brazilian head of it and whatever, individuals started realizing that, man, if I get the whole kind of other boards on my side, then we can outflank the Europeans and फिर मैं पैसे बना सकता हूँ. And the unintended consequence of that was that FIFA then kind of really supported these non-European boards with like money and prestige and blah, blah, blah. And of course, football had a lot of corruption, a lot of problems. But one thing it did was that it grew the game. And this is not the only reason the game grew. And, I'm super simplifying it. But just from the aspect of the governing body, the body had an incentive to dilute the power away from the traditional houses. And that in turn allowed the game to become a bigger thing. So now if you're playing a World Cup, you're not really worried, oh, Brazil or Germany ka match hota hai, warna koi nahi dekhega. You don't worry about that because the game has grown big enough. The prestige of the tournament has grown big enough that whoever plays in it, it's a big deal. It's not being made a big deal because of who is playing in it. It's the World Cup. It's a big deal. Now you look at cricket. Cricket for, at first was just interested in protecting England and Australia. And then now it's just interested in protecting India and then to some extent the other two teams. So it's not really looking to grow the tournament or the sport itself, right? So the easiest thing in the world is, man, at least in World T20s, you've got competent sides from smaller teams. Let's expand that pool, get them part of the World Cup. ठीक है, अगर white wash भी होता भाई, 3 घंटे का मैच है, हार जाए वो, एक दफा अगर पापा न्यू गिनी पाकिस्तान को हरा देती है, you'll change the direction of the sport. You know, the same way you had those opportunities with Ireland and Kenya and whatever, and you completely let them go because you never expanded the tournament. And instead, you're like, oh shit, ye Bermuda or Kenya jeet rahe hain, let's change the tournament even more so that these guys can never make it. So I feel that's where the thing is, yes, there's a billion better possible formats out there, but they're not going to happen because cricket has never moved beyond its short-term thinking as a sport.
Yeah, I think I hope the powers that may be and the authorities do listen to not only you but so many others who might be voicing their opinions on this, because I think ultimately we are just going to watch the same teams playing each other. And yeah, so I think we're coming towards the end, although I would love this conversation to carry on forever, but in the interest of time for you and for the public in general, Emma, I would like you to actually had three players in mind which I wanted you uh, to give an opinion on as to what Pakistan cricket thinks of them, because from an Indian perspective, it's like an enigma. One is Shahid Afridi, the other one, Hi to the Cat. I've seen that so
Yeah,
many times in other podcasts. So
bigger
uh,
star than Shahid Afridi.
yes. So and Ijaz Ahmed is the other one, and yeah, I'm taking you back quite a lot. And now with the third name, I'm going to take you back even further. That is Salim Malik. Because just today I was having a look at the list of players who have played 100 test matches, and I was astonished that Salim Malik actually has played 100 tests. I don't know, for some reason मुझे नहीं लगा था कि सलीम मलिक ने 100 टेस्ट खेले. So what do you think is how do Pakistan view them as part of the legacy of their cricketers? These three. I don't know, for some reason I had these three players in mind, Ahmed.
Okay, well, I think it's very Ijaz and Salim are one category and Afridi is another category. So let's deal with Afridi first. Afridi
And
is,
Ahmed, sorry to interrupt, but Afridi, I just wanted to make one point that Afridi, for me, he was such a frustrating person because whenever he would come, there was so much anticipation, and for for so many times he would just get out for a single digit score. But even then, he went on to play I don't know. I don't think anybody has played so many games to score 8,000 ODI runs and pick up 390 plus ODI wickets at such a low average. I mean, as his batting average after scoring so many runs was still so low. So, what was it about Afridi that got the Pakistanis excited, and why is he on such a pedestal in spite of actually performing? I mean, having a very mediocre batting record. I mean, that's my personal
yeah,
perception.
yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, if you're going to look at Afridi um, as a batter, for example, फिर तो he was never a proper batter to in any kind of conceptualization. Um, and then even if you want to look at it as an all-rounder, he's not really an impressive all-rounder either. But I would say there's a couple of things that, and you know, this is a topic I've written about probably the most in my earlier career. Um, but I would say there's a bunch of things. Firstly, Afridi represented, like in 97, he comes in and plays a 37 ball 100. Is that Afridi really was giving you an insight into a cricketer from 20 years later, a T20 cricketer? You know, like Afridi kind of looked at 50 over cricket and viewed it as a street match, which is usually like 6, 7 overs or whatever. And that ethos really is what T20 cricket is. And I think at some level, just, you know, okay, again, in the 90s, if you got to, if the openers made 50 in the 15th over, you were like, okay, good solid start. And somebody made 230, you're like, oh man, this is, you know, this is over.
Yeah.
So, you know, cricket was a very kind of staid sport back then. So somebody like him, and he wasn't the only one, obviously, Sana Jayasuriya and you know,
Adam
Gilchrist and lots of other guys in there as well. But like, you know, maybe um Sanat and Gilchrist was still coming from more of like a evolution of batting, so to speak. Like Afridi was one of one when he came in. Then they were more like him, and they were better versions of Afridi in many places. But he was a kind of trailblazer. And then in Pakistan, Afridi comes at a time when, so there's something very interesting and it's not discussed a lot. Um, so very, very quickly, cricket in South Asia was, when it starts, is an urban and elite thing. And both in India and Pakistan, it's from those big city centers, the upper classes that are giving you players from the national side. Then in just before the era that we kind of grew up in, it starts becoming spreading to smaller towns, still very urban, but also maybe in the big cities, it's involving kids from middle class and working class backgrounds. It's not all upper class people. And then in the 80s and 90s, it explodes into the rest of the country. Now in Pakistan, that explosion, it was Karachi and Lahore, and then it explodes to small town Punjab. So if you look at like the 90s side, there's a lot of cricketers from small town Punjab. KPK, up until the turn of the century, I think ye Shaheen Afridi ka bada bhai hai was one of the few test players from there. Fast forward to today, post 9/11, KPK, which is Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, has, if you look at the Pakistani 11, you could play an all Pashtun 11. That would be an international quality side in Pakistan. But also that every Afghan cricketer is actually playing in the same geographical and physical space, because all of these guys were refugees living in Pakistan. They pick up the game in Pakistan. So it's actually that Pashtun belt, or I'm generalizing here and etc. But that part of South Asian society, the Pashtuns, cricket becomes so big that they're able to sustain two international sides. Pakistan and Afghanistan are both coming from the same background. And literally all of these guys at some point idolized Afridi. So his impact as a cultural phenomena is huge. So like it's probably bigger than Wasim or Imran, even though they're far more accomplished cricketers. But it's really that time of history that Afridi emerges, where Pashtuns themselves are going through, with 9/11 and the Afghan war, they're going through a lot of tumult and change in their society. Again, cricket represents like something that's more modern, something that younger people like. With there's a lot of like migration and movement away from rural to urban, etc. Is sare cheez ke andar, I'm only restricting Afridi's analysis to the Pashtun community because he was Pashtun, but he was wildly popular in Karachi and Lahore as well. Because again, another way of looking at it is that Pakistan made the cinema kind of ends in the 70s, and then cricket becomes really the only popular. It's not even cricket is not inclusive of all of Pakistan, but as inclusive as you can get. For example, we often talk about Pakistani music, like Pasuri or whatever. Pakistani music is not included. Pakistani music is either regional people making folk music, or it's rich people in the cities that make Junoon, Vital Signs, and Pasuri and folk studio and whatever. It's not representative. Cricket is still more representative, even though cricket also doesn't include a lot of communities, the Sindhi and Baloch communities, etc. But it's still more representative. So, us sense mein, like when you don't have film and TV and music ke heroes, cricket covers a lot of that in Pakistan. And Afridi comes at a time when televisions become more open, mobiles become, so it's an explosion of access to cricket, of access to media, etc. And then most importantly, like for a lot of people, like who are not analyzing the game or whatever, you talked about, Afridi was so frustrating because you are looking at the holistic match. But cricket is actually, only idiots like us watch cricket, because no sport in the world का छोटा तरीन format is 4 घंटे का. मतलब वो बेसबॉल को छोटा कर रहे हैं कि भाई 4 घंटे की हो रही है, बहुत बड़ी हो गई है. टेनिस में वो शोर मचा रहे हैं कि 3 घंटे का हो गया. वो क्रिकेट ने कर करा के 200 साल बाद भी 4 घंटा is the smallest time we can give. No one in the world has time to watch this stupid sport for that long. And so it's great watching Afridi. You turn it on for 15 minutes, you get excited, you get angry, you get upset, you maybe break a glass or something. You've gotten the whole and he was offering you that in the ODI era. Now, T20 is offering you that. Afridi was giving you something that was, he was the internet in a time of analog, right? So it didn't matter whether आपको अच्छी चीज मिल रही है नहीं, आपको foreign चीज मिल रही है. And I think that was, he was more representative of the zeitgeist than he was a good cricketer, if that makes sense.
I think, yeah, and this what you just spoke about Afridi takes me back to one of the first points that you made in this podcast, that for Pakistan cricket, apart from cricket, there's nothing much that an average cricket fan can look forward to. Uh, if I compare it with India, of course, we have Bollywood, we have now we have a lot of other sports that are
Yes.
making news,
Yeah.
and but yes, even then, cricket is still the number one. So if I compare the situation of India with Pakistan, then of course what you say is very much makes sense, and I think Afridi's fame, I think contributes to that, or probably is.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'll give you a really good analysis for it. Like, no Salman Khan movie is winning the Oscar or the National Film Awards, right? But people go nuts for Salman Khan movies. I think that's a good way of understanding Afridi.
Yeah.
It's not like you're going to watch like high quality cricket, but people love that passion, that style, the look, the persona. That's what they're there for. And I think, to me, following Afridi really taught me a lot about fandom, because you know, we tend to focus too much on strike rate kya hai, or he should have batted first or second, which is fine. People watch the game for those, but that's not the only reason people watch sports. They watch it for a lot of other reasons. And it's really guys like these that tell you, oh, okay, it's not just about who wins or loses. People are just there to watch him, and as soon as he's out, they leave. That's something that happened. And like, people might be like, don't you want to watch the win, or don't you want to watch this? No, they want to watch a Salman Khan film. They're not there to watch an art movie, which is what test matches
Yeah.
usually are like.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry, but very, very quickly, if you can talk about Ijaz Ahmed. Uh,
Ijaz and Salim.
yeah, Salim. Ijaz, mein, isliye, because for some reason, Fandi, he had an impressive record against Australia at a time.
Yeah. He destroyed you guys in Lahore in that innings where he made Afridi look human. We was so crazy in that
So,
90s.
जब अहमद, जब इजाज और सईद अनवर, for some reason when they used to play against India, मुझे ऐसा लगता था कि उनके अंदर कुछ कुछ खुंदक है against I mean, the kind of shots that they would play against Indian bowlers, I never saw them play those kind of shots with that kind of khundas against other bowlers. That's just my perception. Yeah.
So actually, both, sorry, I was just, but like, yeah, both Ijaz and Saeed have good innings, particularly against Australia. But, there was definitely, playing against India was bringing out the best to a lot of players, and which is common in sports. You play your rivals, you play better.
Yeah.
And I think that what happened, yeah, like, I think it definitely, there was definitely that swag that 90s team played with, and it was only against India that was fully realized. Like, I think a good example is that in Headingley in 99 they beat Australia in that swag way, and then Australia comes around and slaps the shit out of them in the final. So there's only so much swag you can do against a team like that. But with India, there's more success, so maybe that comes across that way. um and but yeah, like, I think Salim Malik, for my generation, is bichara really maligned, because we saw him by the 90s. Wasn't like in the 92 World Cup, he doesn't have a good World Cup, and then by 94, he's caught up in fixing. Or mere liye Salim Satta hamesha main use kehta tha, because that was so much more fit. So for example, when you look back at what Salim Malik does at the Nehru Cup in 87, he was his record against India is absolutely wild. So if you talk to people who saw that Imran Khan's era of cricket, they rate Salim Malik really highly. If you talk to someone like me who starts watching from 92, I do not rate Salim Malik, because
Yeah.
even though he played well, he was caught into many controversies. And if the fixing scandal comes out, it's a lot easier to blame someone like Salim Malik, no one liked that much, rather than accepting if Wasim and Wakar, who are your icons and idols, they are involved in something. So I think Salim got a lot of flack for that. And Ijaz was obviously his brother-in-law, and so they had that rishta with each other as well. But Ijaz, I always found, yeah, like Ijaz A again had less controversies, but he was also, I definitely enjoyed watching him play a lot more because he was more aggressive. He could, again, I think we were kids then, so you're also, you'll forget like the big picture and you'll remember maybe one or two innings. And so again, that innings in Lahore in '97, I think anyone who saw that will remember it because he was just brutal. And again, I think modern audiences watching it probably won't understand because now a lot of batting happens that way.
Yeah.
But for that to happen in the mid '90s was unreal,
And unfortunately, some of those wonderful matches, the quality of viewing that we see on YouTube is just pathetic. So
Yeah.
that's for another day to discuss. But yeah, I think we have covered a lot of points here. Although Emma would love to talk more about so many other aspects of the game, but I think we have been able to cover quite a lot, and it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show and talk about so many aspects of the game, which very few people actually these days talk about, especially here in India. So I think from that perspective, it was always something that I was looking forward to doing an interview with you. So thank you, and I hope to have you again on the show sometime in future. So
For sure, for sure. It'll be my pleasure. It's really fun talking to you. And really thank you for giving me a space to just scream and shout. Because as you said, not a lot of people are interested in these conversations. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to somebody in an intelligent way about these problems. But yes, thank you so much for having me, and I'd love to come back on the show.
thank you, Emma. So and thanks to my audience here on SNS Cricket Diaries. Till the next time, please take care. Bye.
Bye bye.